Hi everyone, my name is Sami Peterson and I use she, her pronouns. I'm here today to talk to you about my design thinking journey and all of the steps that led me to create this really cool solution for you all to use. So, I'm a seventh grade science teacher at Hopkins West Junior High. This is my fourth year of teaching, and the main reason why I started this design thinking project in the first place is because it is the capstone project for my master's degree through St. Mary's University. The challenge that I chose to address with this project was based on the observation that I noticed many students post COVID really struggle to find an appropriate outlet for distracting movement based behaviors. And I'm sure that you all have seen this in your spaces as well. I have a lot of students who really struggle to sit still, and to me, that's showing some kind of unmet need. And so that's what I'm hoping to address with my design thinking project. I wound up defining the design thinking challenge as how might we create a way to help students reduce the frequency of distracting movement based behaviors in order to increase engagement. And the design thinking process has many different steps. Here it's presented kind of linear, but the way that the design thinking process works, you can move backwards and forwards to different steps. And I'll kind of come back to that at the end when I talk about maybe revisiting some of the earlier steps. So, this design thinking project that I have been undertaking took place over the course of 16 weeks, two different courses. The first course was empathizing and defining. These are really ways for us to look at a problem differently. So, a big part of design thinking is that it encourages us to reimagine problems and maybe see different elements of the problem that we might not have seen before. And so, empathizing and defining really was me collecting a lot of data, interviewing people both in and outside of education, and reading a ton of academic research. After I had a better sense of the problem, I created design principles, which I'll show you next, and used those to guide the ideation and prototyping and testing process. And so, what I will ultimately share with you is the first iteration of my prototype. Actually, it's the second iteration because I did make an initial piece for feedback. So, after that first set of reading academic research, collecting data, I came up with these design principles. Number one, the solution must include movement based instruction. Number two, the solution must develop positive student student relationships. Number three, the solution must build on positive student teacher relationships. Number four, the solution must be trauma informed, focusing on key principles such as developing student sense of belonging and support for building executive functioning and social skills. Number five, the solution must be planned through the intentional use of effective classroom management strategies, such as establishing consistent routines. So, the idea is that in order for the design principle to adequately meet the question, it has all of these different elements. And so when I share my solution or my prototype with you, we're really thinking about how all five of these principles are addressed. And so I'll be pretty explicit in sharing what those are. Something that to me felt a little scary when I was going through this process at first, when I came up with these principles, the first thought through my head was, how could I possibly meet all five of these principles with one solution? And so I'm going to show you what I came up with. The solution that I came up with is a timeline that starts before the school year even starts and has different activities and resources to be used throughout the school year and towards the end of the school year. I have them all color coded here by which design principle they've met. So everything that's in purple is about addressing the design principle to incorporate movement based instruction. Everything in mint green is looking at student student relationships. The things that are in coral, like the Strong Start Plan, relationship tracker, all of these bubbles are about student teacher relationships. Pieces in yellow are about trauma informed teaching. And the fifth design principle, which is in gray, so that would be the first 20-minute analysis and the Strong Start Plan, those are all about classroom management strategies. Although, as you'll see as we go through, there's a huge amount of overlap between a lot of these categories, and which is the reason why they work together so well to address my design challenge. So my design challenge is, again, how might we create a way to help students reduce the frequency of distracting movement-based behaviors in order to increase engagement? And this solution is designed to meet the challenge. A lot of elements here are teacher driven and occur during the planning stage of instruction. That's why about half of the resources are intended to be used before the school year starts. This solution can only be effective if all elements are implemented. And everything that's underlined is hyperlinked. So all of the things in the middle here have other resources that I'll walk you through. And so the idea though is that although you can definitely take pieces of this solution that fit well within your content, your context, um, the best way to use these resources is together. And that's the way that they were designed, is to be used together. So before the school year starts at West, we have our Strong Start plan. It looks like this. Um, those of us at West are pretty familiar with this process. The idea is that it is a really intentional way for teachers to think about how to create conditions for success, how to teach academics, how to set up classroom essentials and agreements, and how to tie all of those things into the IB framework. And so, to supplement this already incredible tool, I've created a couple of different things that can help strengthen that already existing resource. And so, two things. One is not something I created. So, this cooperative learning structure resource was created by our instructional coaches at West, and it contains incredible activity structures to help get students working together. So, this first resource, along with the thing I will show you next, really addresses building positive student student relationships. So, a lot of it is about intentional planning of collaboration and how students can be working together in pretty structured ways to help them develop those skills. The other resource I created to help think about student student collaboration is this collection of team challenges that will help your students getting working together. And team challenges are really great because they can help set students up for success. So many of the activities in here are low prep. Games can help kids get to know each other in a non academic way. And some of the structures could be used with academic content as well. The first group of activities is building activities. So it has a little information about how to use how to use the activity structure, in addition to materials needed and some ideas about how to adapt those activities. For each of the activities, there's also a slide that you can copy paste into your own slides to just make it even easier for you to use these team challenges in your own space. But for any of these collaborative resources, whether it's an academic learning structure from the cooperative learning structures resource, or whether it's a non-academic team challenge, for students with trauma, we really want to consider doing these activities in pairs instead of groups of four. Reducing the number of social dynamics is a key element of trauma-informed teaching, which sort of leads me into the next resource that may help strengthen your Strong Start plan. So I created this trauma-informed teaching one-pager. I called it a one-pager. It actually wound up being longer than that. Surprise, surprise, there's a lot to trauma-informed teaching. The first page is helping to define trauma, looking at some potential signs, and looking at the possible functions of trauma behaviors. There are a lot of different reasons or functions of those behaviors, and understanding is the first step to being able to implement principles of trauma informed teaching. Something that's really important about trauma informed teaching is that trauma informed teaching is not just for students with trauma. A lot of these practices benefit all students. And so this next page here kind of walks through 6 different elements of trauma informed teaching, 6 different ways that trauma informed teaching can be incorporated into classrooms. And I have also included some more resources if you want to learn more about trauma-informed teaching. Because there's significant overlap between culturally responsive and trauma-informed teaching, Zarena Hammond's book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, is an excellent, excellent place to start. And a lot of these different articles, videos, podcasts really are at different levels where if you're a person that is pretty comfortable with the foundations of trauma-informed teaching, there's still a lot of resources here that will help deepen your understanding and help you find new ways to be an even more trauma-informed educator. In addition to those resources that you'll be able to kind of read through at your own pace, we also want to consider how we're using PBIS or positive behavior intervention supports to support our students with displaying positive behaviors. So kindness tickets are a great way to help develop positive student-student relationships. We can reward students for helping each other out, for being really excellent collaborators, for going above and beyond. There are a ton of different things kindness tickets can be used to reinforce positively. So there's a ton of information in these first parts. And that's why really the solution is weighted towards the beginning part of the school year, because we know that setting ourselves up at the beginning of the year is the best way to set the foundation for strong relationships with students. And so the remainder of these resources are intended to be used later on in the year as a way to sort of check in and see how things are going, see if there are any changes that need to be added. So later on in quarter one, this is a really good place to see how you're doing with movement-based instruction. And so one thing that I personally added to my lesson planning documents are these check boxes. So this is just what my lesson plan template looks like. It works along well with International Baccalaureate, where we identify key concepts, questions, key vocab, and write up our statement of inquiry. The important piece here is that we are incorporating movement frequently. So the research shows us that it's more important to add movement for every 20 to 30 minutes of instruction. Movement can also be categorized into two different categories. We can be looking at academic movement, movement that is integrated with the content, or we can look at non-academic movement, which the research shows is equally as beneficial on attention, memory, and behavior. To help you out with integrating movement into instruction, I created this resource that will provide first some background about what the research says about movement-based instruction, some tips for getting started, as well as if you want to watch a 20-minute video on movement-based instruction, feel free to access this video. There are a lot of mentions of specific authors, but it really does go into depth about the reasons why a lot of these resources were created. The first group are brain breaks. These are non-academic movement-based activities. The second grouping of activity structures are academic activities that will get kids moving around. So this resource is intended to support the integration of more movement into your classroom, I suppose, and addresses the first design principle. The last part of this is about a halfway through the school year check. So if you are in the middle of a school year right now, these resources might be a great place for you to start. And then thinking about next year, maybe coming back to these before the year starts resources. So midway through the year, you are feeling like pretty good maybe about your relationships with students, or you're feeling maybe kind of stagnant and you're not sure how to re-energize your classroom. The relationship tracker and the associated resources are a way to help develop or check in about student-teacher relationships. So this relationship tracker I developed to help really just be a checkpoint of how your relationships with students are doing. So it'll take a little while, but it's definitely worth it. You'll fill in the names of your students and check the boxes for what applies to you. So if you know the student's name and pronouns, you would check the box. If you know something they're interested in, you would check the box. If you can identify their strengths, if you talk to them one-on-one, if you know their scaffolds, and if you have sent a positive note home. This might be one that you haven't done, and that's totally fine. For student 2, maybe I know their name and pronouns. I maybe don't really talk to them that much, or they're gone a lot, so I haven't really done any of this. They've got an IEP maybe, so I know what scaffolds they would need because it's built into their IEP. And so what this shows me, this relationship score, is that any scores that are in the red or the yellow are ones that I should prioritize. And this shows me a way to do that. It shows me, okay, I should have a conversation with the student to try to identify what their strengths are and what their interests are. These are really great ways to connect with kids. I also have built in some additional resources to provide background on relationship building, as well as resources to help improve teacher-student relationships. And so 2 of those resources include a positive message home template, which is something that you can use to copy paste, send a Canvas message, send an email, to reach out to a family and really try to strengthen that connection between families and home, which, especially if you include the student on that message, can be a great way to strengthen your relationship with that student as well. I also created a positive note to students template, which can be printed, a quick handwritten note, and you can deliver these to students throughout the day. Students love getting mail. They love to like have a physical thank you note from a teacher. It's totally worthwhile. They can bring it home, show it off at home as well as greeting every student at the door. So there are lots of different ways to help support relationships, but the relationship tracker itself is really intended to help you have a check-in point. The last resource I have to share with you with this whole solution is something I created called the first 20 minutes analysis. This document and this exercise is intended to help think about consistency in the first 20 minutes of class. So the first piece of it is scripting. This would have you look at exactly what you do from the moment the bell goes off to the end of that 20-minute period. After you're done scripting, and you could have another teacher do this to help support, or well, I guess to help you see some of the things that you maybe do unconsciously. Second, you'll annotate, you can color code, underline, just mark up this document with um, logistical tasks, what elements of this help build relationships, when students are around to move, and what are consistent routines. The main reason why it's helpful to color code these things is that it allows you to think about um, where do I already have consistency in my first 20 minutes, and where do I have space to be more clear and be more consistent in that time. We know that every teacher's style is totally different from each other, and so the first 20 minutes of class are going to look really different. But it is a really powerful and important way to create consistency, which we know benefits students who have trauma. We know that it benefits building positive student-student relationships when they know what to expect. We know that being a constant in students' lives helps develop a positive student-teacher relationship. And so not only does this first 20 minutes analysis help think about opportunities for classroom management, but it also connects to almost all of the other design principles as well. So all of these resources together from the beginning of the year to check-ins throughout the year can help address increase in engagement essentially. So because the design cycle itself is iterative, meaning we go through many different processes and it's non-linear. So as I said earlier, this really does make it look like you do empathize, then define, then ideate, then prototype, then test. But in reality, design thinking is really cyclical. When you find out new information, you can back up a step. So for example, I'm currently reading Culture Responsive Teaching on the Brain by Zaretta Hammond, and it has a ton of relevant information to what I have been spending the last 16 weeks on. I'm almost wishing I had read this book before I had started my design thinking project, but this does give me the opportunity to sort of come back to some of these other steps. When I have more information, the empathize and define stages can go even deeper, right? And when I network with new colleagues, I have new perspectives that'll allow me to think about the other half of this design thinking with more perspective. And so the really cool part about this is that even the design principles are subject to change, which means that this timeline that I've created could also change over time. And this is a great tool because it has the ability to flex based on the needs that I have identified in context. And this also means that it can be adapted for use in your own context as well. And so something you might be wondering is, how could I possibly use this in my space? If you were in the middle of a school year, I would recommend starting with the midway point with the movement-based instruction check, relationship tracker, and first 20 minutes analysis. These are resources that can help you out at any point throughout the year. I would also recommend bookmarking helpful resources that you think you might want to use. This is a good place to look for potentially extended learning, depending on how much time you want to devote to this during your prep or outside of your prep. And if you are starting this process at the beginning of a school year, utilize the timeline throughout the year to help you start off the school year strong, bookmark resources, You might even organize your PLC or your IGDP coaching cycle around implementing some steps of this timeline. It's just a suggestion. Again, you can take what you want to from this process, but really the important piece and the way that it was intended was that all of these resources would be used together. Because in order to truly address the entire design challenge, each of these individual pieces fits into a larger whole. So while an individual tool may be really powerful, the best way is for them to all be used together. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Please let me know if you have any questions or if there is anything that needs to be clarified. I'm excited to hear your questions about it.